Hi, everyone. It is Laura Smith of SLP Mommy of Apraxia. And today I'm so excited because I have my first guest who is an adult living with dyspraxia, otherwise known as developmental coordination disorder, Jenny Hollander. And she is, I found her because she's been writing articles on DCD or dyspraxia. And she currently is the director of content strategy at Marie Claire. So, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Laura. I'm so pleased to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. I think that both of us kind of feel pretty passionate about raising awareness in terms of this because it has a high prevalency rate, yet it's still really not well known. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it is shocking. I think there are so many reasons, which I don't even know if it's particularly useful to go into them, why the US has missed the boat on this. But I think what everyone can agree on is that the US has really missed the boat on this. I'm from the UK, and don't get me wrong, dyspraxia is not well known in the UK, but it is better known. I would say that throughout my life, I ran into a lot of people who knew what it was, and it was a very vague understanding. It was like, oh, it's a bit like dyslexia, but for the body, right? And it wasn't a great understanding, but they had heard the term. In the
Right.
US, to the point where like people didn't believe that it was a disorder because they had never heard of it, and they kind of couldn't believe that a disorder could be so prevalent and that they could never have heard of it. They almost just kind of said, well, that seems impossible to me.
Wow. That would have been really shocking then. Talk about culture shock then coming from UK here. And
Yeah,
you
yeah.
were saying before too that in so many ways the US has, kind of, awareness in other things and kind of advanced in some other areas, but this is definitely one that is just not there.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting thing because the US is considered by much of the world to be very trigger happy in terms of diagnoses. In many ways, the US is thought to overdiagnose, which I don't personally particularly agree with, to be honest. I think there's a lot of different ways to look at that. But it's funny that the US has a stereotype, and yet the US almost almost never diagnoses this one frighteningly common thing that does affect so many people. And my best guess is that, I think there are probably 20 million people or so in the US who have no idea they have this. And that just, it breaks my heart as someone who has it and whose life has been so much, how do I say this? My life has been much more difficult than it would have been if I hadn't had it, but much, much easier than it would have been if I hadn't known I had it. And
Yes.
I can't imagine how hard it must be for people who don't know they have it. I really can't bear it.
Yeah, because I was just telling you before we kind of went live here that I have read other articles on other adults who have said they got diagnosed later on, and it was actually a relief because they think they're just clumsy or there's something wrong with them, when in fact it's a disorder that could easily just not easily, but that we could at least provide accommodations for, and that you would know that, you have this, and, these are things that we can do to work around it instead of thinking that you're just coming up short because I don't know, whatever people unfortunately put into their head that,
Yeah,
they
it's
think.
obviously the clumsiness is the most obvious symptom, and that's something that I was a very clumsy child. I'm a very clumsy adult. I absolutely hate that symptom. But the clumsiness actually was never, it didn't bother me particularly. What did bother me is that I felt like I was slower than other people. I did
Yeah.
I couldn't speak at the right time or in the right way or enunciate in the right way. I found it really hard to eat in front of other people. I still find it very hard to eat. I found it very difficult to, just move, go for a walk with a friend and walk and talk at the same time, let alone while holding a cup of coffee. Things that were very easy for other people were very hard for me. And without the apparatus to know that there was a reason I felt that way, the obvious thing you come to is, oh, well, I'm slow. Uh,
Yeah.
and it's so sad to me that people probably do go through life thinking, oh, I'm just slow, I'm just lazy, I'm just not trying hard enough, when the
Hmm.
reality is their brain is functioning differently.
Yeah, exactly. I want to go back to your kind of childhood. So I just want to hear from you. I've read your articles, but other people might not have. Like, can
Yeah.
you tell us what your symptoms were when you were diagnosed, how you interpreted that diagnosis?
So I was very young when I was diagnosed, although I have been told actually since from experts that 9 is, to me, it's very young because I have talked to a lot of people, as you have, Laura, who are adults and haven't been diagnosed. But actually, 9 is quite late to be diagnosed in a perfect world. It's quite
Right.
but I was 9, and I remember people at my school, some teachers took my parents aside and said there is a huge distinction between her level of intelligence and what she's achieving. Some things she's very, very good at. I was reading much faster than my peers. I was writing very well. Um, it's a really good example of the spiky skills that a lot of people with developmental disorders have, that I was always a really excellent writer and could read, and was reading all the time, and very quickly, but I could not throw a ball against the wall without hitting myself in the head or breaking a light. I could barely walk across the room. You know, I remember a friend once saying to me, every time you walk across the room towards me, I'm never quite sure if you're going to get there. And,
Oh gosh.
and so they took me to a specialist and I was diagnosed, I think, pretty quickly. I remember going through tests, and then I remember over and over again, they re-diagnosed me because I had a lot of accommodations throughout my life while I was taking tests. And, you know, for my GCSEs, which are a big thing in the UK, as with my A levels, I was given about a third extra time than other people because of my disability. And to do that, you have to get tested over and over again. They can't just kind of take one person's word for it. So I kind of got retested and retested. So throughout my young life, I was kind of told over and over again and tested for this. And it was confirmed repeatedly that I had this. But as a child, even though the Dyspraxia Foundation in the UK is probably the best, one of the best, if not the best, foundations in the world in terms of awareness and being set up very early and having a huge amount of research and local chapters and all of that. In spite of that, the impression I got when I was growing up is that I was just clumsy,
Hmm.
which that never bothered me. And it actually wasn't until later in life that I began Googling other symptoms of dyspraxia that I realized it was why I was very easily overwhelmed, why I had trouble speaking, enunciating, eating, breathing sometimes, why I felt very panicky, very anxious, why I had a lot of panic attacks, particularly in my teenage years, why I felt like I could never quite speak in group conversations or know how to interject or what level to pitch my voice at. A thousand little things that I never knew were correlated with dyspraxia until I literally read it on Wikipedia when I was in
Wow.
my teenage years. And as more and more research came out throughout my life, I learned more and more about it. But I'm one of the really lucky ones to be in that situation. And I have to say that for a lot of my teenage years, I was in a remarkably insecure place because I thought that I was slow and I was stupid and I knew I had dyspraxia. So
Yeah.
I just can't bear to think about the people who have never heard of such a thing and just assume that they are worse than everybody else.
Yeah. Yes. Um, wow. I have a lot to I have a lot of thoughts that I want to say about that. I guess let me go back when you were diagnosed. So, did you get OT then, or occupational therapy?
I did. I have to say, and this was no one's fault. I did have occupational therapy. It wasn't very specific occupational therapy. It was kind of general disabled kids occupational therapy. So I was put in a class with lots of other dyslexic children, and we did things like little, how do you say? We like played little games, like spatial awareness games.
Mhm.
I don't think that was particularly useful for me. I think it would be for other people, but for me, and also because my clumsiness was never my most severe symptom, nor the symptom that bothered me most. But what did help me, and I always think this and tell people this, is that I had a lot of therapy when I was younger because I was so anxious and at times very depressed. And I
Yeah.
think that was personally for me a lot more helpful than the occupational therapy ever was because I
Yeah.
didn't need to learn to be less clumsy. That was never really going to happen for me. But I had to learn to kind of forgive myself for it and
Yeah.
not feel guilty about it. And therapy was life changing in that way.
I love that. I love, I'm big on just mental health and everything in general and just ending the stigma with that because I think it's so bizarre that the largest and one of the most, prominent organs in our body gets the least attention and is supposed to have a stigma around it. Like it makes no sense. Like it should literally have its own doctor. That's how
It's
important it is.
absolutely crazy. I could not agree more.
I know. And, it also leads me to thinking, just when you're talking about anxiety and depression, we're actually, my background is apraxia. Like I specialize in what's called apraxia here in the US, but verbal dyspraxia in the UK. So it's more has to do with the motor planning of the speech sounds as opposed to getting the language out
Yeah.
necessarily. But anyways, we're really looking into so many adults are reporting now that we have the official diagnosis and now we have people who have grown up to report that they had this experience. Almost every single person I've talked to indicates there's some sort of anxiety disorder, whether it's, they've been actually diagnosed or not. Almost all of them report some sort of anxiety, with it. A lot of people are reporting like comorbid mental health conditions that they have. And there's so little research on that. And so it really is like, is it, as you were saying, part of maybe having dyspraxia or part of having, in my field, apraxia, or is
Mm,
it, like the chicken before the egg, right? Like kind of argument. Like, did you develop anxiety because
exactly.
you had this disorder? But then knowing, yes, like knowing that these kids can be at risk for that, whether we know the cause or not, knowing that it's correlated and getting them to a mental health provider right
Yeah,
away, like you
yeah,
said, and
yeah.
just to help with acceptance and understanding and like, yeah, all of that.
Yeah, as you say, it's so chicken and the egg. But one thing that I too have read the scant research that is out there about how children, they haven't done a lot of studies on adults, but children are much more likely to suffer from anxiety and depression when they have apraxia or dyspraxia, sensory issues in general, um, or the other fields that those things are in. I know dyspraxia isn't technically a sensory disorder, depending on who you talk to, but that's a very different thing.
I
Um,
know, right?
or some people think it is. Anyway, not the
Yeah.
point. But I do think that when you grow up and you are very easily overwhelmed and you feel much slower than everybody else and you have no idea what that is a recipe for mental health issues. And
Mhm.
I can't help but think that if there was a way to communicate to everybody who felt that way, that it is not them, it is something that their brain is doing. And also to communicate the benefits sometimes of developmental disabilities. Like I know you've talked about this with your daughter, about her capacity for empathy, for example, and that's
Yes.
one example of it. And I know that I read and write in a way that I don't think I would be able to if my brain wasn't, in my personal theory, overcompensating for something. That's why I
Yeah.
have my career. So
Yeah, exactly.
in a way, it's there's a way to be able to say, right, I have this and I'm not going to blame myself for it. And I'm going to be able to say, well, because of that, I am able to have so much more empathy or skills in another regard. And I
Mhm.
think we need to teach people to look at it that way.
Yeah, I mean, that's why neurodiversity, I mean, diversity in general, we all know the
Yeah,
benefits, but that's why like neurodiversity needs to be included in that because people do have different perspectives and different viewpoints or different strengths that they can bring to the table, regardless of whether they have some perceived um, weakness or whatever. Like it might not be, it might have heightened something else in them, like you said, like the reading or writing, which that was the other question I had when you were talking. That's so interesting to me about developmental coordination disorder, aka dyspraxia, is that it the profiles can look so different. So I can have kids who have developmental coordination disorder and struggle with writing, and they are in OT to work on letter formation and spacing and everything like that. But they might not be affected gross motor, like they're rocking it on a soccer field. That's where they're excelling. Where it's like it can be opposite, like in your case, where you didn't have a problem seemingly with those fine motor things, like you said, stringing things together and stuff weren't particularly helpful for your specific presentation of dyspraxia, where it might have been for other people struggling with fine motor, you would have been best helped possibly with the gross motor. Not that
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just, there's so many different profiles. I want people to know that too. It's not, you're going to have motor planning issues in gross and fine motor, or you're only going to have motor planning issues in gross, but not fine, or you're only going to have it manifests in very, very different ways.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, they say that with there is no two children or people with DCD or dyspraxia that are the same. And I've talked about this before in my articles, but three members of my immediate family have it as well, and
Yes.
all present in very different ways, which I think is so interesting because we're a very close family, but we don't tend to bond over this because we don't really have a lot in common about it, because all of us have it in very different ways, you know, it's different
Yes.
by severity, by symptom. So, you know, we're more likely to talk about anything but it, you know, and we're
Hmm.
all part of the same family, the same gene pool that spawned it. So you know, that's a really good example of how different it is for every single person.
Yeah, talk about that a little more. You did talk about, because it's your dad, right? And like,
Yeah,
you
my
said,
dad and then my two brothers. My two brothers have it less severely,
okay.
um, and my father has it. I would say probably about as severely as me. And we have some different symptoms. For example, he can't ride a bike. I can ride a bike. Eating
Yes.
he finds quite easy. I find eating very difficult. But in a lot of other ways, we are both very, very clumsy, although he considers himself less clumsy than I think the rest of the world considers him. And I don't think he'll mind me saying that because he knows that he's clumsier than perhaps he thinks he is.
I love that. That's so interesting. Exactly. Just it does manifest itself in so many different ways. Have you met any other adults, or talked to them, or do you have friendships or relationships with anyone else that's outside your family with it?
No, never. I've never met another person in my life who has it. I mean, okay, apart from my immediate family, and growing up in the UK, I would occasionally run into somebody else who had it. But they had it in usually a very different way, often with stuff like handwriting, which
Hmm.
my handwriting's fine.
Yeah.
Never had it. I never met anybody whose symptoms were similar to mine in any way. Uh,
Wow.
and although in my later life I've met a lot of people over the internet
Yeah.
who do have it, to which one of the saddest parts is that almost always a lot of people do reach out to me, as I'm sure they do to you too, Laura, and they say, okay, my child, I think they have it. I don't know what to do. But it's almost never an adult reaching out and saying, hey, I think I have this. I don't know what to do. And I'm
Hmm.
sure they're out there. So I worry that they just have never found out. And that worries me that there's an entire adult population who maybe just think they're slow.
Yeah, yeah, um, I've interviewed other people, like, there's this guy named Jordan from a page called Fighting for My Voice. He's now more doing apraxia awareness, but still, until he was telling me that, you know, once he started that page, like, these adults, like, people in their I mean, way older than him, from 40s to 60s, reached out and just saying, like, "Oh my gosh, like, I never saw another person that's like me. Like,
Yeah,
thank you for putting this out here." I hope your articles can eventually reach those same people who would
I
reach
hope
out to
so.
you.
I mean, my father, and I suspect this is probably true of a lot of people as well, because it is so genetic often. My father, certainly when I was diagnosed, kind of began to slowly but surely be like, huh, this feels familiar. But it
Yeah.
didn't take until I was about 20 when I could describe the breadth of my symptoms and feel comfortable doing so. And I knew it wasn't just clumsiness, that we actually began openly discussing it. And he began saying, you know, it's so interesting. My whole life, I just thought that I struggled with background noise. I thought it was just me who struggled with this or that. And I kind of put it to the back of my mind and pushed on.
Yeah.
And as his generation, particularly in Britain, were apt to do. Um, and there are probably so many people out there like my dad. My dad's thrived, luckily, but my dad has a lot of spiky skills. And I know
Yeah.
people who maybe weren't given the tools to thrive in that way.
Yeah, those splinter skills I think can be really fascinating because it can also affect things called executive functioning. So that things like time management,
Mhm.
or I know you were talking about just time zones in general being hard for you, but that is that can be very symptomatic of the disorder, where some people might struggle with it and some might not. And the whole thing about awareness is if you knew that you have developmental coordination disorder and that it's manifesting as difficulties with time and time management,
Yeah.
you forgive yourself. Like you said, it's
Yeah.
heartbreaking to think someone could potentially be out there and then just be admonishing themselves for always being late or not understanding time or what is wrong with them. And
Yeah.
it actually is just symptomatic of, the disorder.
Exactly. And you can organize your life a lot better when you recognize that,
Yes.
like other people, like I have to write down everything, like even the tiniest things of my day. I get very overwhelmed unless I write down everything I have to do and then go through and cross it all off. Otherwise, even if I do it all, I think I've forgotten it and I get overwhelmed and panicky and anxious. But it's because I recognize that I have a problem in this that I am able to do that.
Yes,
Oth-
exactly.
Other people don't do that, and I'm fine with myself doing that in a way that other people don't have to. But if I didn't know I had dyspraxia, I'd be like, well, why should I do this? No one else has to do it. I'll just try harder, and that would never
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Oh, try harder, right? Like,
Oh
no.
God, I know. Oh, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me, so you didn't have a problem riding a bike, you said, right?
So what's interesting and has always been interesting to me is that I think, at least for me, I have a pretty moderate classic case of dyspraxia. So it's definitely not as bad as it is for some people, and it's not as mild as it is for some people. And as with my father, what we've kind of both figured out that if we practice something enough, we become passably good at it. And
Okay.
my mother was very set that I would ride a bike. And she had me do it enough that I became passably good at it. And my dad plays tennis every Sunday. Um,
Okay.
and everyone, and they laugh at him on the court. They call him snake hips because he moves slightly oddly around the court. But he's quite good at tennis. That they win their local thing a lot.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and even though we are both quite clumsy, the things that we are able to practice, we are fine at. We'll never be better than fine, but we can do them.
Yeah. That leads me to a question because, it's so similar with apraxia of speech in terms of just the motor coordination aspect of things. Do you find that some days are better than others? Like, you might have an easier time with certain things than you do other days?
Yes. Oh, yes. It does depend on the day, but generally, if I can keep myself quite regimented, like if I can keep myself on task and like, okay, I'll do this, then I'll do this, then I'll do this. But my job is. I love my job, but it can be demanding. And occasionally I can get really overwhelmed and doing too many things at once. And whereas somebody else would be able to not kind of drown under that, I do
Mhm.
tend to drown under that. And I blame myself for drowning under it.
Oh,
And then I beat myself up, and then
right.
it's just this cycle. And also, days where, for example, okay, let's say we go to a fairground for the day, something that's very active like that, or we go paintballing. That will be so much more exhausting, and or even a wedding. Anything
Mhm.
that involves me just being physical and out and about and talking and moving for the entire day, I find it absolutely exhausting. Whereas in many ways, just kind of sitting at home working is a lot more relaxed because I know what to do there. And
Yeah.
the movements.
So you mentioned that you had problems eating. So I guess like sometimes. So I'm wondering like in the sense of that motor task, like more of a motor task. Do you find that to be inconsistent on some days versus others?
I find it inconsistent based on who I am with. So if I'm with my boyfriend or my family, people I'm very comfortable with, I almost find that I relax to the point where I'll always eat very, very slowly and very delicately. But if I'm at a big dinner or a wedding or anywhere that I feel kind of like tense or on edge, or then my eating will almost slow to a stop. I'll find
Wow.
impossible to even, eat a bite without kind of struggling through it, especially if I'm talking at the same time, like a wedding,
Yeah.
because you're making conversation, you're talking, you're drinking, it's a whole thing. Whereas if my boyfriend and I are just, watching TV and eating pizza, I don't tend to have any problems because I'm very relaxed about it. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, sometimes if I'll go out for dinner. So, okay, so when I was dating, for example, I have a boyfriend, he's in there. But when I was dating, people would always say, "Oh, do you want to go out for dinner?" And I could not think of anything worse.
Oh
Struggle
no.
through talking and communicating and eating and trying to, be attractive. And
It's like
I
immediate panic.
Oh, it was my worst nightmare. I don't think my boyfriend and I went out to eat for maybe 6 months. I just couldn't
Oh.
get the idea of it.
I mean, but it's good that you knew that. Otherwise, you would
Yeah,
just think like, "What's wrong with me? Why can't everyone else goes out to eat on dates? Why can't I do this?"
exactly. So I never blame myself for it. And again, like we've talked about this a few times now, but I just can't bear the idea of all these people who are like, oh, I should be able to do this and I can't. What's wrong with me? Whereas some
Yes.
people are like, okay, I know what's wrong with me. Am I ready to tell this person that I have this weird, not a weird thing, that's not, but like this a quirk perhaps? Or
Yeah.
I'm not ready to tell this person that I have this quirk, and
Yeah.
personal preference, not a beating myself up issue.
Yeah. So that is people often ask that too. Like, when did you feel safe, or how did you disclose that to your boyfriend? Like,
Oh, that's
did you do it
great.
the first day? Did you? Yeah.
Babe, do you remember how I told you I had dyspraxia?
I think it was on the first date.
It was on the first
Or
date.
second date, yeah.
I don't remember this very well. You
You
knew about the second date. Okay. So I don't remember this particularly well, partly because we drank far too much on our first date. Both of us, I mean, it was very romantic, but we had pre-dinner drinks and we didn't have dinner because of what I just spoke about.
Yeah.
And so we ended up speaking for so many hours, we skipped dinner entirely. So both of us got far too drunk. I don't remember the dates. But I do recall that when we met, I was 27. And I would say that after my mid 20s, that was kind of a turning point for me where I was no longer going to pretend that this wasn't a huge thing in my life. And
Yeah.
at the age of 27, although again, I don't remember this conversation, I have no doubt that at some point during the date, he probably turned to me and said, "Do you want to get dinner?" And I said, "No, I'm not comfortable eating around you." And he said, "Oh, okay, why is that?" And then I probably told him, is
Yeah.
based on our dynamic, I'm pretty sure it's went something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that self-acceptance piece, like, I feel like I hear that a lot, that pretty much from kind of like the late teenage years moving into your early 20s, there is this process of some people have said they grieved over it. Some people have said
Yeah.
they got depressed over it. Not DCD in particular, but I'm speaking of the people I've talked to who have apraxia.
Yes.
Do you think that's probably true with DCD?
Um, it's hard for me to say because it's hard for me to say because I was young when I knew I had it, and then learning the different ways that I had it came as a relief for me
Yeah.
personally. Because when I remember thinking when I was like maybe 16 or 17, why am I having all these panic attacks? Why am I so overwhelmed? And then looking at symptoms of dyspraxia and realizing that was one, and feeling comforted by that. So, I mean, maybe if it had come as I, I think it's very valid to grieve for the things that you are aware you will never be able to have. But at least for me, it came as a comfort to know that there was nothing wrong with me. I mean, there was, but
Yeah. I
I
know
was,
what you mean.
yeah, that was comforting for me. But I think everybody has a very different relation to it, especially depending on, as with you and your daughter. I think when my parents are very supportive, and I was very lucky. But when your parents really support you and help you become the best version of yourself, I think there's a huge difference between parents who might, for example, say, all right, try harder, do better.
Yeah.
Make sure you can ride that bike, like don't use an excuse here. My parents
Yeah.
are like that. I know you're not like that. Like that would
Yeah.
be very damaging, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Even though it came from love, I'm sure.
Right. Right. Because you want to see them do the best that they can
I
do.
mean, you don't understand where they can't. You assume they are being lazy or they're not trying hard enough, but they are
Yes.
trying. There's nothing.
Yeah. Oh, I need to make a meme on that, like some sort of graph that says, kids. I mean, we say that all the time about other disorders, but it's so true. Like, kids with dyslexia aren't just being lazy. Like, they
Yeah.
literally have a problem with their brain that's preventing them from reading,
Yes.
fluently. And it's the same with this. And it's so sad that we would, or even in PE, like, there are just some horror stories, I feel like, luckily, Ashlyn doesn't have any of these because,
Mm.
again, we all know she has this. So you can make an accommodation and not shame someone for not being able to do the jumping jack like all the other kids, or the push
Yeah.
up or the crab walk like the other kids. Like, you recognize, hey, she has motor planning disorder. Like, maybe we'll modify it for her, yeah, I guess I was asking you that question because you said in your mid-20s you finally decided that you were going to own it. So I guess that's what I was asking you.
I think that was because in my mid-20s, as to a lot of people who have really any issues or no mental issues at all, I had a period where I was very, very anxious, and I had to get psychiatric help because I was having many, many panic attacks every day, and it was really interfering with my life and my health. And I think, and I had so much therapy in the aftermath of that to work through. I had cognitive behavioral therapy, I had talk therapy, I had an amazing psychiatrist who I still work with. And I think the process of having so much therapy was actually a huge blessing for me, because I think that I'd had a lot of therapy earlier in my life too, but I think that kind of ironed out any of the remaining kinks that allowed me to feel shame over the things I wasn't particularly good at. And I think that was kind of the point where I was like, F it. Excuse my language, but and also I think your late 20s for a lot of people are the time when you're like, you know what, like, this is who I am, and that's fine.
Yeah, I love that. What advice would you have for anyone out there who's resonating with your story, like that's an adult?
That's a great question. I would love for there to be a way for there to be, I know that you, Laura, have started an amazing community, but I would love for there to be a big community of us who could, in the US, who could work together to raise awareness and, do something akin to what the foundation has done in the UK. It's always been, I have no experience in the nonprofit world. I don't think I'd be very good at it, but it's always been something that I wish existed. And I wish that there was someone out there who could set up something that would make living with this easier in America. I don't know if that person is me, but I would love to think that somebody out there is that person.
I don't know. That just basically to me sounded like you were called to do it. So just putting that out there.
I mean, I can just imagine me in the nonprofit world just saying, like, things like, oh, I need to raise some money. Oh, can I have some money? No, okay, all right, that's fine. I'll just go over there. I think I'm too British for it. I'm too shy.
Well, I can tell you that I was a walk coordinator for I live in Denver, Colorado, and so I was the Apraxia walk coordinator for 5 years, and that is certainly how I started too. It was like, I'm like, how am I? It literally happened. I never did charity work. I never did nonprofit work. I didn't know anything about it, but I knew that Ashlyn had gone to a walk, and I knew it was incredible for her. So that was like her first one. She was 4. You're surrounded by all these other kids who, are experiencing what you experience. It's really powerful. It's really uplifting. It was amazing. And then they stepped down the year after that. And I was like, wait, no, like there has to be a walk. Like, this was amazing. And the founder was like, you could do it. And I'm like, no, I don't know how to do. And I said the same thing. Like, I can't ask people for money. Like, it just felt so uncomfortable. And I mean, I can tell you that, like, when you're so passionate though about if you truly believe in what you're raising money for, you'll get over that embarrassment really fast. And it doesn't matter if people tell you no, it doesn't matter if people don't answer. I mean, we always joke, like my walk team too, or my planning team, because then I had a team. We would joke that, like, if we post a picture of our kid on Facebook, we'll have, 60 to 90 likes. And then you'll post to like some post asking for money for the walk, and you'll get like one, and it's from someone on your walk team. So that's really not for the faint of heart, but you get over it pretty quick. And I don't even know if you need a nonprofit to start. Like, just having someone who is visible out there, like in the Apraxia world, just having, they're different people. There's in the UK, actually, there's Mikey. He has Mikey's Wish, and Jordan here in the US. And there's a few adults around, and just like they've just created that, I guess, like we like to call it like a safe space where someone can come to you and feel like, okay, this person gets me. And I tell people too, like, vulnerability is strength. And, you know, it's very vulnerable to come on here and talk about having dyspraxia and having panic attacks and seeing a psychiatrist. Like, that's incredibly vulnerable, and that is so brave, and it's something not a lot of people are willing to do. But I will tell you that by doing that, someone will watch you and they will see you and they will see themselves in you and they will say, if she can do it, I can do it too. Like, and that's so powerful, even if just one person, you know? So
Yeah.
anyway, I'm so glad you're on here, because I really feel like that will happen.
I'm so glad to be on here, and yeah, I just wish that everybody who had this could be made aware of you and the community that you've built, and that just the resources that are available if you know where to look.
Well, the thing though is that my specialty really is apraxia. Developmental coordination disorder overlaps because,
Yeah.
you know, because of the nature of motor planning. Like, I really feel like there needs to be some sort of face out there that it doesn't, that is brave enough to be this vulnerable,
Mm.
and that adults would feel comfortable. Because, you know, I am a parent, so I mean, though I have a lot of understanding, it's not the same as having a first person um, to go to, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Not
It
to
is, no,
push you
it,
into anything, Jenny, but just
no,
saying,
no, it is.
think about it.
I mean, I constantly think about it myself, and I constantly think, I don't know if I'm the right person for this, but I love, I couldn't agree more that it's something that needs to happen. It
Yeah.
needs to happen, and if someone needs to do it, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who quoted this, but I always like to think, I like this one quote. It says, if it's both terrifying and amazing, you should probably pursue it. I love that quote. It's so true. Um, anyway, is there anything else that you would like to get a message about? Any final thoughts?
No, not really. Just to say thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate everything that you've done for the, oh my goodness, the word is escaping me. The neuro. Oh my God, what am I thinking of?
I
Um,
I can help you, but I don't want to presume if you just need
no,
time.
the word that means neurodivergent.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, don't
Um,
be sorry.
the neurodivergent community in general. The word neurodiverse kept coming up, and it wasn't the right word.
Yes,
Um,
actually, yes, there is a misconception. There's a misuse of those two terms.
yeah, and I think in general, while you know, we can and should be able to label these things and say, yeah, there is a difference between apraxia of speech and dyspraxia and all of this. Like, ultimately, I think anything that matters is that someone says, okay, I identify with these symptoms in some way, and this is me, and I am not slow or stupid or not trying hard enough, or all these things that I may have been led to believe I am.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, my final thoughts would just be, you know, it is, again, like, just to reiterate, it is very vulnerable to put yourself out there, but in doing so, you will help so many people. And just also for, you know, just telling people that you can live a life full of purpose and what you love to do and excel at different things, even if you have some sort of disability or disorder in some other area. You know, like, you're sitting here working for Marie Claire magazine, you know, and I mean, I mean, and it's so empowering because you knew, it helped that you knew that you had this. So,
Yes, I was very, very lucky. Very.
yeah. So, all right. Well, everyone, you can find Jenny, like, if you Google DCD and Jenny Hollander, her articles will come up. She has an email address there. I'm sure that people, how do people contact you?
Often through Instagram, which I love, through Twitter, which I also love.
Oh, great.
Well, sometimes, which I love. I respond to pretty much all of it. I love it. It makes me, I mean, I don't think there is anything in this world genuinely more validating than having someone reach out and say, this piece has made me feel less alone. And
Yeah.
I, you know, and sharing it with their community and their friends and saying, this is how I feel. And it's the most validating thing that's ever happened to me, people doing that. So I love it when people reach out to me.
Great. So you're just Jenny Hollander on all of those handles?
Oh yes, I'm just Jenny Hollander, and my email address is its Jenny Hollander, as in it's Jenny Hollander. The email address is
Oh,
literally
yeah.
it's Jenny Hollander. It's very confusing. I realize itsjennyhollandr@gmail.com, and yeah, please do reach out.
That's so great. All right. Thank you, everybody. And obviously, you know how to find me. Find me on any of my social media handles if you have any questions or want to know how to get in touch with her or anything like that. And thank you for watching.